The Cult of Rakdos, the red and black guild of the plain city of Ravnica. The cult is known for their hedonistic ways, and they definitely hold personal pleasures above all. The most common way for the cult to give worship to their founder Rakdos is through the art of pain, both to themselves, but more commonly to other victims. So come one, come all, to the carnival of Rakdos. And we'll see if you have what it takes to be one of us. So here we have Rakdos, Lord of Riots. Black, black, red, red. So that's only 4 mana for a 6/6 flying trample. Okay? But the downside, I guess, is that you can't cast him unless an opponent has lost life, any life, this turn. And then, not only is he just a 4 mana 6/6 flying trample with a small downside, but he also has creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each 1 life your opponent has lost this turn. So what we want to do with Rakdos, Lord of Riots, is simply damage our opponents, cast Rakdos, and then play some big smashy guys. That's it. That's what we want to do with Rakdos. And so let's talk about ways easily for us to inflict damage on our opponent, okay? Okay, so first off, we're going to start off with our little pingers who are going to target a single person and not everyone on the battlefield. So these guys want to inflict damage directly to one target. So our very first guy is Goblin Fire Slinger for 1 red mana. He's a 1/1, and you tap him to deal 1 damage to target player. We could target ourselves if we wanted to. Most likely we're going to hit somebody. Hopefully we get them out real quick before Rakdos, so we can just tap them, ping somebody, and then Rakdos can come right out. Next we have Rakdos' Return for X, so whatever we want to put in there. Black-red, it's a sorcery, and Rakdos' Return deals X damage to target opponent, and then that player discards X cards. So that's pretty good. What we want to do is target somebody. Make sure we probably want to target the person with the biggest hand size, and we're going to cut them down, get rid of some of their options to interact with us. Next we have Unlicensed Disintegration for 1 black-red. It's an instant. We destroy target creature. It's pretty simple. But if we control an artifact, Unlicensed Disintegration deals 3 damage to that creature's controller. So that's pretty good. Not only are we getting rid of a creature, but we're also going to inflict 3 damage to an opponent who owned that creature. Next we have another utility creature. He's Vashino Heretic. He's 2 and a red. He is a 1/3, and then for 1 and then a red mana, we tap him to destroy target artifact. So if we have an artifact that's really annoying us, we can just pay 2 mana, tap him, destroy that artifact. However, Vashino's Heretic also deals damage to that artifact's controller equal to that artifact's mana cost. So what we're going to do is, even if it's a small artifact like Soul Ring or something, we still get to destroy it. We only deal 1 damage to its owner. But if they have something like Paradox Engine or something like that, which is like 5 mana, well, that's 5 damage to the face for only 2 mana, which is very nice. And we also get rid of that artifact. Next up, we have Mogis, God of Slaughter, for 2 colorless mana and a black-red. He is a legendary enchantment creature god, and he's a 7/5. He's indestructible, but because he is the way that these gods work is that if we do not have devotion to black and red, in this case, that is less than 7, he's not a creature. So if we don't have enough pips up top, the black and red pips, then he's just not a creature. He's just a 4 mana indestructible. We still get this next ability, but we really need at least 7 pips to make him that 7/5, which is really strong, who is also indestructible. But this happens no matter what, so don't worry, and that is, at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, Mogis deals 2 damage to that player unless he or she sacrifices a creature. So if they want to sacrifice a creature, that's fine. But if they want us to deal 2 damage to them, that's also really fine. Next we have Indulgent Tormentor for 3 black. He's a 5/3 flyer. And he has, at the beginning of our upkeep, we draw a card unless target opponent sacrifices a creature or pays 3 life. So at the beginning of our upkeep, we're going to get to draw that card. We pick somebody, and if they want to sacrifice a creature, once again, that's fine. Or if they want to pay that 3 life, even better. And if not, we get to draw a card, which is just value, guys. So, yeah. Next up, we have Combustible Gearhulk for 4 red. He is a 6/6 with first strike. When he enters the battlefield, target opponent may have us draw 3 cards. If that player doesn't, we put the top 3 cards of our library into our graveyard, and then Combustible Gearhulk deals damage to that player equal to the total converted mana cost of those cards. So what we're going to do is when we play them, we pick somebody. And they can have us either draw 3 cards, which is nice, or if they don't want us to draw 3 cards, we just mill the top 3 cards of our deck, and then whatever that converted mana cost is for those 3 cards, we're going to deal damage directly to their face, which is really good because we have a lot of big guys in our deck. Next up, we have Inferno Titan for 4 red. He's a 6/6, and he has Fire Breathing, which is for 1 red mana. We can do this as many times as we have red mana. He gets +1/+0 until end of turn, so he can just hit in for a whole bunch of damage if we want to pump him up. But the real good ability on him is whenever he enters the battlefield or he attacks, it deals 3 damage, divided as we want among creatures and players. So when he enters the battlefield, we can deal 3 damage to a creature or a player, or 1/1/1 or 1/2, or however we want to divide that up. But we also get it when he attacks, which is also really important. Now we have Omnixilus Unshackled for 4 black. He's a 4/4 legendary creature with flying and trample. Now he has a painful ability, and that is whenever an opponent searches his or her library, that player sacrifices a creature and loses 10 life. So if they forget that he's on the battlefield and his ability is that nasty, great. Sacrifice a creature, lose 10 life, sucks to be you. He also has a really relevant ability where whenever another creature dies, ours, theirs, doesn't matter, we put a +1/+1 counter on him. So he gets bigger as long as we're killing things, which, usually probably not a problem. Next we have Staff of Nin, which is a really expensive artifact, but its ability is really good in this deck. So for 6 mana, we get to draw a card at the beginning of our upkeep. So just for free, we get to draw an extra card on our turn, which is just pretty good by itself. But he also taps and deals 1 damage to target creature or player. So hopefully what we can do is just ping people with it, but we're also getting the value of drawing a card at our upkeep. Next up is Warstorm Surge, which in this deck is very spicy. It's 5 and a red. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, it deals damage equal to its power to target creature. And we have a lot of high power creatures in this deck, so we are hopefully just going to hit people as hard as possible. They enter the battlefield and deal damage directly to a person or a creature if a creature is in our way. And then we're just going to keep doing it over and over and getting all that value. Next is Karavek the Merciless for 5 black-red. He's a 5/4 legendary creature, and he has a really nasty ability where whenever an opponent casts a spell, he deals damage to a creature or a player equal to that spell's converted mana cost. So whenever an opponent casts that spell, we're going to pick someone to deal damage due to that spell's mana cost, which is really spicy. Next up, we have a creature that's sort of like Inferno Titan, and that's Borgadon Hellkite for 6 red. He's a 5/5 with flying, but he also has flash, so at any time we want, we can cast him like an instant spell and have him enter the battlefield, and when that happens, he deals damage divided as we choose among any number of target creatures or players. So instead of 3 damage with Inferno Titan, we're dividing up 5 damage. Now he doesn't get the ability when he attacks, it happens again, but he has flash, so we can really hopefully catch someone unaware. Now those are our single target guys, and what they want to do is really target and pick on one person and keep dealing damage to that guy. Or if someone starts getting a little out of hand, we're going to change our target to that person as well to kind of keep them in check for everyone else. These next guys, however, want to deal damage to everyone and everything. So starting off our list for cards that want to deal damage to everybody and everything, we have Rakdos Charm, which is a black and a red mana for an instant, and we get to choose one of three options. Option 1, exile all cards from target player's graveyard. So if someone is trying to play with their graveyard and abuse it, we're going to target them, get rid of their graveyard, and bring them back to balance. The next option is destroy target artifact, which if we need to get rid of a really pesky artifact that's going to try to shut us down or have them win the game, then we'll go ahead and use this to destroy it. But the third option is why we're using this card, and it's really spicy. So, each creature deals 1 damage to its controller. Now that hits us too, but it's going to deal 1 damage to everybody for each creature they have. So if we have someone who's trying to go wide with a whole bunch of guys, they're going to pay the biggest because they're going to be getting dealt 1 damage by each of their creatures. Next we have Thermal Alchemist. For 1 and a red mana, it's a 0/3 defender, so it can attack, but it has tap. Thermal Alchemist deals 1 damage to each opponent. So if we're in a 4-player game, that's hopefully 3 damage. And it also has, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, untap it. So there's a chance that we could do it a couple of times. We're probably not going to go like infinite with it or anything because we just don't really have the capability. But we are dealing 1 damage to each opponent, which is really good with our discount. And it's cheap enough to hopefully get out early to make sure that on turn 4 we can get our commander out. Next we have Torment of Hellfire. X black, repeat the following process X times. So however much mana we want to put into it, this happens that many times. Each opponent loses 3 life unless that player sacrifices a non-land permanent or discards a card. So they can lose a whole bunch of life, lose a whole bunch of things, or discard a whole bunch of cards. And guess what? All of those options are fine. They're great. We really want them to lose the life, but if they're going to clear their board for us or get rid of answers from their hand, that's also perfectly fine. Next we have a mana rock that's going to deal damage to everybody, and that's Cryptolith Fragment. For 3 mana, it enters the battlefield tapped, but after that, we can tap it and add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool, and each player, including us, loses 1 life. Now, it has another ability on it that probably won't happen, because hopefully we're going to kill them once they get to 10 life. That it probably just won't really happen a lot. But that last ability is, at the beginning of your upkeep, if each player, including ourselves, has 10 or less life, we transform Cryptolith Fragment, and it becomes Aurora of Emrakul, which is a Eldrazi reflection, and it's a 1/4, but it has flying and death touch, and whenever Aurora of Emrakul attacks, each opponent loses 3 life. Next we have another card that's kind of like Thermal Alchemist, and that's Lobber Crew. For 2 and a red, it's a 0/4 defender, and it has tap. Lobber Crew deals 1 damage to each opponent. Its untap ability is whenever you cast a multicolored spell, untap Lobber Crew. And another one that's like both of those is a Nettle Drone. For 2 and a red, it's a 3/1 with Devoid, which means technically it has no color, even though we're paying a red for it. And it has tap. Nettle Drone deals 1 damage to each opponent. But its untap ability is whenever we cast a colorless spell. And we have a lot of Eldrazi which are colorless, so there's a chance that we can deal 1 damage multiple times. Next we have Plague Spitter. For 2 and a black, it's a 2/2, and at the beginning of our upkeep, it deals 1 damage to each creature and each player. So that hits our creatures and us, but it's also hitting everyone else and everything else on the board. And it also has the ability of when it dies, it deals 1 damage to each creature and each player. Next we have Retreat to Hagra, which is 2 black. It's an enchantment with landfall, so whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we choose one of these abilities. The first one, probably not going to come up a lot, but its target creature gets +1/+0 and gains Death Touch until end of turn. The second ability is probably what we're always going to use, and that's each opponent loses 1 life and we gain 1 life. Next we have Pestilence, which is 2 black, and it reads, at the end of our end step, if no creatures are on the battlefield, we sacrifice it. So that means if there's no creatures on the battlefield whatsoever, ours or our opponents, we have to get rid of it. But its other ability is black, so we get to use this as many times as we have black mana. Black, Pestilence deals 1 damage to each creature and each player. So it's like Plague Spitter, but it's on an enchantment instead of a creature. So it's a little harder to get rid of. The next card is just like Pestilence, but it's red, and it's Pyronemia. And it's 2 red, and once again, it's just like Pestilence, but red. At the beginning of our end step, if no creatures are on the battlefield, sacrifice it. But for as much red mana as we have, we can keep pumping it into it and deal 1 damage to each creature and each player. Next is a really good board wipe with some of our tougher creatures, and that's Chandra's Ignition for 3 red. It's a sorcery. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to each other creature and each opponent. Now that hits our creatures, but it hits our opponents and not us to the face. So that's really good with some of our really high power creatures. Next is sort of a pet card for me from Ixalan, and that's Dire Fleet Ravager. It's 3 black. It's an Orc Pirate Wizard. It's a 4/4 with Menace and Death Touch. But its really fun ability is when it enters the battlefield, each player, including us, loses 1/3 of his or her life rounded up. So it's going to hit for a lot, and it just has to come in, hopefully on turn 5, and give us a huge discount on our creatures. Next one's a little hard to pronounce, but it's Heartless Hetisugu, or OHH, and he's 3 red, and it's a 4/3. His ability is really spicy, and it's tap him. He deals damage to each player, including ourselves, for half of our life total, rounded down. So whatever our life is at, half of that, it's gone. Palace Siege for 3 black is an enchantment, and when it enters the battlefield, it has 2 modes, but we only pick 1, and that's what it stays with. And that is either cons. At the beginning of our upkeep, return target creature card from our graveyard to our hand, which we probably won't use unless someone's really heavy on removal, and we really want to get some of our creatures back. Or if we had to discard some of our bigger creatures, and they're going to just sit in our graveyard for the rest of the game, that's not that great. But really what we want to be using is a Dragons, which is at the beginning of our upkeep, each opponent loses 2 life, and we gain 2 life. So once again, in a 4-player game, that's going to be 6 life that they are getting drained. We're only going to gain the 2, but that's a 6 mana discount for our next creatures if Rakdos is on the battlefield. Next is another discard card, but it hits all of our opponents, and that's Skullrend for 3 black-red, and it's a sorcery. Skullrend deals 2 damage to each opponent, and those players each discard 2 cards at random, which is kind of important, because usually you get to choose what you discard, and you just get rid of stuff that you don't want to play, or is just not useful in that time. This one, it's random, which is very powerful. And it's also dealing 2 damage to each of our opponents. So once again, that's 6 if we're in a 4-player game. Next is a very, very evil card, and it is what Rakdos is really all about. And it's Havoc Festival for 4 black-red. It's an enchantment. Players can't gain life. So we've been hitting them in the face and trying to bleed them out the entire game, and now they cannot gain life, which is very, very evil. But that's not all it does, because it also has, at the beginning of each player's, including ours, or including our own upkeep, that player loses half of his or her life rounded up. So like OHH, everyone loses half of their life, but only on their upkeep. and we can't gain life either, which just really makes it a really short clock for everyone on the battlefield. Our next card is Pestilence Demon, which is Pestilence on a Demon. For 5 black, 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 it's a 7/6 flyer, and it has the Pestilence ability, which is pay as much black as you want into it and deal 1 damage to each creature and each player. Another card I'm going to put in this list technically doesn't deal damage to everyone on the battlefield, but it's definitely painful to everyone on the battlefield, and that's Sire of Insanity for 4 black-red. It's a 6/4, and its ability is just at the beginning of each instep, each player discards his or her hand. That means no matter what, if you're drawing cards during your turn, you better empty your hand because you're just going to have to discard those cards anyway. This is a very evil Rakdos card, and it is definitely causing pain on everyone on the battlefield. The next 2 guys I'm going to talk about, well, I guess only one's really a guy. The other one is pretty genderless, are people who want to really take advantage of all this damage we're dealing. And those 2 guys, or one guy and one horror, is Cryptborn Horror for 1 Rakdos, which means we can pay either black or either red for those two manas. It's a creature horror, and it's a 0/0 with trample. Well, that's not very good. Oh, wait, there's more. When it enters the battlefield, it gets X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is the total life lost by your opponents this turn. So if we've used something like OLHH, and they already lost half their life, and that's 3 times, because 3 players are doing that, including ourselves, but it only cares about our opponents, our Cryptborn Horror can come in giant. And with something like Warstorm Surge, that is just vile. Our next one kind of has an ability like our commander, except it actually gives us mana. With our commander, it doesn't actually give us mana, it just gives us a discount on colorless mana for our creatures. This guy actually gives us mana, and that's Neheb the Eternal. For 3 red, we get a 4/6 legendary creature zombie minotaur warrior, and it has Afflict 3, which is an okay ability, but that is whenever it attacks and it gets blocked, defending player, so whoever decides to block it, automatically takes 3 damage, which is great. But it also has, at the beginning of our post-combat main phase, we add red to our mana pool for each 1 life our opponents have lost this turn. So once again, if we are able to deal a whole bunch of damage, we get a huge discount with our commander, but if he's on the battlefield, Neheb, we also get red mana also including. So our next group of creatures are going to be our big smashy monsters. So starting off our big smashy monster list is Bane of Balaged. For 7 mana, Bane of Balaged is a 7/5 with the very, very nasty ability of whenever it attacks, defending player exiles, so removes from the game, 2 permanents he or she controls. They can be land, they can be tokens, they can be creatures, doesn't matter. They're going to pick 2 of them and remove them from the game. Next we have Breaker of Armies for 8 mana. It's a 10/8, and all creatures able to block Breaker of Armies does so. AKA, you throw it at someone, and they have to chump with everybody. Now we have Ulamog's Crusher for 8 mana. He's an 8/8 with Annihilator 2, which is a very, very nasty ability. And that is, whenever this creature attacks, defending player sacrifices 2 permanents. So they're not exiled like with Bane of Balaged, but they do have to sacrifice, which goes to their graveyard, 2 permanents. So once again, that could be lands, tokens, creatures, doesn't matter. Whenever he attacks, so whenever you declare the attack, he doesn't have to hit him. He doesn't even have to finish that attack step. But as soon as you tap him and target someone for an attack, that triggers. But he also has a, I guess you would say downside, but I don't really see it as a downside, which is Ulamog's Crusher attacks each turn if able. Now we have Dread Cicada Demon for 7 black, black, black. He's an 8/8, and he has a board wipe ability, which is when we play him from our hand, destroy all creatures our opponents control, but we also have to tap all of our creatures. So the way that I see it happening is we attack with all our creatures. We then play Dread Cicada Demon. We destroy the entire board except for our stuff, and our stuff's already tapped down, so there's not really a downside to playing them at all. We just get an 8/8, and everyone's stuff is destroyed. Now we have Pathrazor of Ulamog, which is an 11 mana 9/9 with that nasty ability Annihilator, but this time we have Annihilator 3. So whenever it attacks, defending player sacrifices 3 permanents. He also has a really good upside with he can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures. So they can't block with 1, they can't chump. They can't block with 2, which probably is still a chump. They have to block them with at least 3. Now we have It That Betrays, which is a 12 mana 11/11 with that nasty ability Annihilator 2. However, he is the reason that Annihilator is so tasty for us, even more so than it already is, because whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent, we get it. They sacrifice it, and then we immediately put it in play under our control. So a really good synergy with this deck is most likely with Annihilator, they're going to sacrifice lands. That seems to be the most common thing. But we also have Retreat to Hagra, which once again, whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we get to trigger an ability. So if they want to sacrifice their lands, they're also going to lose some life, and we're going to gain some life. And now we have the 3 Titans of the Eldrazi. And I wanted to put each one of them in here just for kind of flavor reasons, just because they are the 3 big Eldrazi guys. And the first one that we have in the deck is Kozilek, the Great Distortion. For 8 waste, which is kind of hard to cast in our deck because we don't actually have a lot of stuff that taps for waste mana, which is specific colorless mana. Our artifacts do, like Soul Ring, but it's a little harder to play. But that's fine because he's really just in here for flavor. But he's a 12/12, and when he's a 12/12, and when we cast him, we have to cast him for this ability. If we have fewer than 7 cards in hand, we draw up to 7. He also has Menace, so he's kind of hard to block, and he has sort of a control-y ability, which is discard a card with converted mana cost X, and we get to counter target spell with converted mana cost X. And that's kind of hard to play around, but it's really good if we can trick somebody with it. If they think they have an answer, we've been holding up a card in our hand, we get to discard it if it shares a converted mana cost, and we get to counter a spell, which is really good. The next Titan is Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger. For 10 mana, he's a 10/10, and whenever we cast him, once again we have to cast him, we exile 2 target permanents. Doesn't matter where on the board they are, we get to exile them and remove them from the game. And he's also indestructible. But that's not really a ceaseless hunger if you ask me, so there has to be something else to justify the name. Oh, and here it is. Whenever he attacks, defending player exiles, removes from game, the top 20 cards of his or her library. He's so hungry, he eats their library. That's pretty ceaseless. And finally, we have the big Eldrazi Titan, Emrakul herself, Emrakul, the Promised End. She costs 13 mana, and she's a 13/13. She also has a discount on herself, which is she costs 1 less to cast for each card type among the cards in our graveyard. So if we have enough cards in our graveyard, she already has a discount, but hopefully she also will cost nothing because of Rakdos' ability. But that's not all she has. She also has, when we cast Emrakul, she also has the nasty ability where we gain control of target opponent during that player's next turn. Now, they have another chance afterwards because they get an extra turn afterwards, but hopefully we can deal enough damage to them during their turn that they can't really make up for that damage. Maybe we swing their board in at some other player, maybe even eliminating that player, doesn't matter. We really want to just try to do as much as we can with their turn as possible. But being the head Emrakul that she is, she has to have something more. Oh yeah, she has flying and trample and protection from instants, which is pretty spicy in itself. So now I'm going to just talk about the other cards in our deck. Not necessarily cards that are big or smashy or inflict pain, but the cards that kind of just help the deck move along at a steady pace. And the first one we're going to talk about is Ogre Battle Driver for 2 red. It's a 3/3, and this one really works well with our big guys because whenever one of our big guys enters the battlefield, or any creature, and it's under our control, that creature gets +2/+0, so they get a bit beefier, and they gain haste, so they can attack immediately, which is very nice. Our next spell is sort of a reanimation spell and a team pump spell, and that's Torrent of Souls. For 4 Rakdos, which is black or red, we return up to 1 target creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield if black was spent. And if red was spent, creatures target player controls get +2/+0 and gain haste until end of turn. Another guy here is he's not really a beefy guy, but he does have a really nasty ability, and that's why he's in the deck. It's Steel Hellkite for 6 mana. It's a 5/5 with flying, and he has 2 mana, and we get to use that mana as much as we want, and he gets +1/+0 until end of turn. That's not really the good ability. The good ability is X. Destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost X, whose controller was dealt combat damage by Steel Hellkite this turn, and we can only do that once each turn. So we attack, we see how many stuff that they have, and we add up their mana cost, right? So if there's a whole bunch of 4 drops or 2 drops, or if they have a whole board of 1 drops, that's what we want to target. We want to pay 1 mana so we can destroy each non-land permanent they have that costs 1 mana. Destroys them all. Or if they have a really strong, 5 mana guy, we'll go ahead and pay 5 and destroy that one. Really, you want to look at, usually, either something that you just want to destroy right off the bat, or if they have an entire board filled with same mana cost creatures, we want to get rid of that too. But it doesn't have to be creatures either. It can be any permanent, or any non-land permanent. So to continue with removal package, we have 3 spells here that really just want to get rid of cards. And that's Dreadbore for black-red, destroy target creature or planeswalker. Terminate for black and red, destroy target creature and it can't be regenerated. And Hero's Downfall for 1 black-black, destroy target creature or planeswalker. Now we're going to talk about ways to refill our hand, because we're really trying to hit people hard and hit them pretty quick, and that has a chance to make us lose some of our cards in our hand and not have as many options. And now with our mana being budget, it's not necessarily all that great. So another way to deal with that is getting cheap draw engines in our deck. And some of those draw engines are Sign in Blood and Read the Bones. Now these cards are pretty much similar. Read the Bones is the newer one, and it is Scry 2, so we get to look at the top 2 cards of our deck, and we can either keep them on top or put them on the bottom of our library, or either or. So we can keep one and put the other one down. Afterwards, we draw 2 and lose 2. Another card I have in the deck, because we have big, high casting cost creatures, is Sunbird's Invocation. For 5 red mana, whenever we cast a spell from our hand, we reveal the top X cards of our library, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. And then we can cast a card revealed that way if it has X or less mana cost without paying its mana cost. And then we just put all the other cards at the bottom of our library in a random order. Next we have Blood Gift Demon, which is a flyer for 3 black black. He's a 5/4, and he has, at the beginning of your upkeep, target player draws a card and loses 1 life. So there's a way that we could use it to ping an opponent, because it doesn't have to be us. It can be anybody. So if we want to make them lose a life, that's a really good way to do it. But most likely we're going to target ourselves just so we can get that extra draw. The next 2 cards are actual tutors, which lets us search our deck for any cards, and that's Diabolic Tutor for 2 black black. We search our library for a card and put it in our hand. Then we shuffle. And then there's Rune Scar Demon for 5 black black. He's a 6/6 flying demon, and he has the same ability. Whenever he enters the battlefield, we search our library for a card, put it in our hand, and then shuffle. And so for the final part of our deck is our mana sources, and those are gonna be the budget part of the deck. Usually this is the part where if you have good lands, put them in here. This is where your deck really needs to be yours, because lands can be expensive in Commander. So the way that these decks that I'm making work is we have Command Tower, a dual land that works for our colors. So if we have a tri-color deck or a dual color deck, we're going to have most likely a Guildgate for our dual colors and our tri-lands for our 3 mana cost. We put a Reliquary Tower and a Temple of the False God in there, and then we round out 40 mana with, in this case, it's going to be 20 Swamp and 16 Mountains, and that's going to keep your deck super cheap. Now we can add shock lands and fetch lands and all that, but our budget definitely takes a huge hit there. But another easy way to add mana fixing into our deck is with the artifacts. And we will always add a Soul Ring, because this is Commander. We're going to add a Rakdos Signet, a Command Sphere, or Commander's Sphere, and a Dark Steel Ingot. And then we're also going to put Burnished Heart in here, just to kind of get 2 mana. So if we're really lacking a color, which there's a chance that happens in this budget deck, he's going to be the thing that we can hopefully get, sacrifice it, and bring those lands out. And there we have it. If you're wanting to show your playgroup the way of the cult, this deck is a perfect way to show them how fun pain can be. The deck is just under $100, and the best way to start upgrading the deck is obviously going to be the mana base, but here's a few other cards that can help spice up that deck. Thank you guys for watching, and if you like this and want to see more decks in this budget series, please do the whole YouTube thing. Like, comment, and subscribe. And also, let me know what commanders you want to see added to the series. And remember, to all you cultists out there, made of flesh and bone and boiled in blood, a Rakdos Signet is not considered finished until it has been used as a murder weapon. Thank you guys, and make sure that our signets out there definitely get that final seal of approval.